Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Grit and Glamour. I'm your host, Ruby Veridiano, and on today's episode, we're going to be talking about Black and Asian love, solidarity, and magic and fashion and beyond. Now, recent news about anti-Asian violence has been circulating the media, sparking conversation around the relationship between Black and Asian communities. Now, I'm aware that there are a lot of systemic issues to unpack in just that topic alone. But on today's conversation, I want to be intentionally focused on sharing a vibrant example of what Black and Asian love and solidarity looks like, a narrative that is not often shown in mainstream media. Author, academic, and activist Bell Hooks once said that every great social justice movement has been centered on a love ethic. That's why that I want to really dedicate this conversation to highlight a game-changing example of what it looks like when our communities choose to build, love, and thrive together. On today's episode, I'm excited to welcome Christina Lee and Jerome Lamaar, two powerful and dynamic creatives who met at Baby Phat, an iconic lifestyle brand founded by Kimora Lee Simmons. At the time, Tina was the vice president of branding who recruited the then 15-year-old Jerome Lamaar to design. Today, Tina is the principal at the Love branding team, where she works with brands such as Puma, Sonicare, and LG, while Jerome has gone from designing for Baby Phat and to now designing for Beyonce and working for future-forward brands like Adidas, Google, and launching his own fashion brand, 531. So without further ado, let's go ahead and bring some magic to you today and welcome our guests to the show. Hello, Tina and Jerome. Hi.
Hello.
Welcome. Thank you both so much for joining me today. Tell us where you are tuning in from.
I'm Jerome. In the Bronx, New York.
Brooklyn, New York.
Brooklyn, New York. Thank you both so much. It's such a pleasure to have you both. I remember meeting you for the first time, and I'm like, these two have a very special relationship. I'm like, there's something special going on and with these two. So I'd love for you to talk a little bit about how you met, how this, kind of collaboration started, and did you feel like there was a special connection from the very first day you met each other? Tina, I'll let you take this one since you were the one that recruited Jerome.
So yeah, this was, oh my gosh, I can't even remember what year that was, but definitely a few decades ago. And my ex-boyfriend at the time, he was the head designer for Phat Farm. So he was actually speaking to some students, and Jerome can probably elaborate on the students that were there. And so I, tagged along and I said, let me, check it out. And I walked around the room, and I believe there were design students or art students. I don't even remember exactly. All I remember is I looked at the sketches and I was like looking at this kid. And I was like, how did he design this? Because it looked like someone that's like a seasoned designer. And you can see his background in his in the image right now where he is. But he was like a seasoned designer. He looked like a little boy, like very skinny and frail. And he had this big smile like he does now. And I was like, would you want to intern at Baby Phat? And he was like, oh my God, I'll let him tell his side of the story. And it was then, ever since then, special connection. He was always a very, his energy, how you can see right now, he always had that energy. He was always very happy-go-lucky, always had a bright smile, always had a lot of ideas. So, I just always looked at him like, okay, okay, kid, I got something with you. So come on, you're going to help me, make things, make my life easier, make Kimora's life easier. So that's how I looked at him at that time.
Yeah. Okay, Jerome, now I want to hear your side of the story. You're 15 years old. How did it feel to be like, hey, come and design for us?
So it was a lot of manifestation that led to that point, right? Because before Tina, I call her Tina, but before Christina discovered me, I was a little Black boy from the Bronx, right? Working at Key Food and going to high school and being an honor student, and I'm very tenacious. I've always been that way, right? And what people didn't know is I kept calling the Baby Phat office for every day hi. I used to speak to Franny, who was the receptionist at the time, and before the company got bigger, bigger, bigger. She used to talk to me, and she's like, Jerome, she said to me, Jerome, one day when you are a little older, because I was a little kid doing the most, there will be a position here waiting for you. And so that was the last conversation I had with Franny at that time, and I kind of let it go. I got scooped up in the Honor Society to present to designers in the industry. And then Tina was there that one day. And I remember presenting to a group of people, didn't care because I didn't see Russell or Kimora Lee Simmons. So I was just talking my talk, very confident. Being myself. And was like, this is what I'm going to do when I get older. And just very, 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 just very strong. I was a little bit of a very aggressive young man when I was then. And I will never forget the day that I met Tina, because she came into the space after presenting. I had my portfolio out, went to art school, and I was like the honor student. And she said, who did this? And I was like, I was so like full of myself, I swear. And I remember looking up, because I was sketching already, and looking up and saying to her, like, I did, you know? And Tina was so nice, and she just was like flipping. She was like, well, would you want to work for Baby Phat? My whole energy shifted. I looked up, I made eye contact. It was horrible, but I made eye contact, and I discovered the power of manifestation and just being in the right place at the right time, because Tina literally changed my life at that moment by discovering me. So yeah, it was very magical.
I love that. Well, we're going to talk about the power of manifestation a little bit later in the conversation, which I'm really excited about because it's one of my favorite topics, but I don't often have the space to do it. So we're going to create that space today. So I'm already feeling like we're sending out some like crazy energy into the world right now. Now, let's back up a little bit. Can you tell us a little bit about where you grew up? And was it common for you to witness Black and Asian friendship and unity during your childhood? I'm going to go with Jerome first, since we went with Tina earlier. So what was your childhood like in the Bronx?
So, I mean, I have a very whimsical approach to my upbringing. That's probably why I'm so happy. But I knew a lot of mixed race couples in the Bronx. And I always thought the world in my little hub was like that. You know, I grew up in a really small pocket of the Bronx, which wasn't as aggressive as people think the Bronx could be. It was kind of like the suburbs, like the schooling was great. You know, we went on great field trips, and we knew the difference between Chinese, Japanese, Korean, Cantonese. You know, like literally we understood that, and we knew that because we had Earth Day, we had Flag Day, and we understood the diversity that comes within the community. And so we've always seen mixed people, mixed races, Asian and Black, Japanese and Irish, like all of those things is what made, I guess, my perspective of the world what it is today. So I'm very grateful for that.
Thank you. And what about you, Tina?
So I grew up in Seattle, the suburbs of Seattle called Federal Washington State. And there was a mix. There was a mix of different races, but I will say I always surrounded myself around different cultures since I was young. So there was like enough to mix in. Obviously, it wasn't majority, but I always just kind of grew up that way. So I always surrounded myself around different cultures, and I always just enjoyed that growing up. So I had the capabilities to a certain degree.
Yeah, I think we're all very lucky, and that I think we all have what we have in common is that we've been able to. This is normal for us, but it's not normal for a lot of people, you know. And it's like these are not stories that are being told in like movies or films. So like the narrative around Black and Asian communities is a little bit garbled to me. I'm like, wait a second, what do you mean that's happening, or that's how people are viewing each other? I've always just had this, as Jerome said, like pockets of just love where that was just the norm. So that's why I was like, I really want to, in my little corner of the internet, just shed a light on that, because you two are actual proof of that, you know, the magic that happens when our communities can like build together. So as you know, there's been a lot of like, you know, wave of anti-Asian violence around the world. And because of that, that's why this conversation is happening. Now, I know that there's a lot to unpack there, right? But what I'm really curious about is your firsthand experience in witnessing what, kind of collaborations have come out of strong Black and Asian unity. It could be at Baby Phat, or it could just be in your own personal life. So I would just love to hear from you what stories you might share around that topic. Jerome.
Okay, so Baby Phat was the beginning for me, right? To see that there was a world out there that was just really, really cool, and it was possible. So going into the office at any given moment, you had all kinds of race and like, I just thought I have to admit, I'm going to start off by saying this. Tina really cocooned me and protected me from a lot of stuff that I didn't know was going on. I went from being a naive, kind of very confident kid to being a naive, very confident man, I guess, in a way.
But it's Tina's fault.
Here I am into this office, this corporate environment, and there's so much diversity. So I just always assumed that that was how it was everywhere. And I could go and knock on the door of a VP and ask a question, and they will help this kid. Or I always thought that was the world. So me going into that environment and seeing Black, Asian, Latino, Irish, Italian, all these races that I've always known, but working together to build an empire was magical. It was one of the best experiences anyone could ever have. It was part of an era, and it created a whole chapter in fashion, in culture that can never be copied, because it was so authentic and the work ethic was there. And to see the respect amongst one another was just so much for me. And I was there from a teen to the age of 23. So watching everyone grow from a smaller office to a bigger office, and watching how they all did business together, and watching, you know, and learning from like Tina how to like do certain things as well, and how to present myself in certain rooms. And because it just was one of the best environments that if you weren't there, you could never experience ever. And it's made me into kind of, I say people call me a beast now, but I think I learned a lot of my beastness from working under Tina. And you conduct yourself, how she did business, and knowing this is how you should present yourself and work. And this is how you should present yourself to the world when you're doing this, and follow up and follow through, and all those things that are very important. So yes, Baby Phat was the umbrella, but I think seeing Tina is like my sister now, so it's very different. But seeing the way that Tina kind of moved in that environment as an Asian woman, as a young man, was very important for me as a Black man in the Bronx. So that environment, that respect that I've grown from that was very significant at that time. So
yeah, I love that, because what I'm hearing is that there was strong mentorship there, and when you're a mentor, you take responsibility for someone's growth and development. So I'm sure like Tina is so proud of you. Okay, what about you, Tina? Like, what kind of magic did you experience? And again, like as Jerome said, this was an iconic chapter in fashion history. So, you know, like now when I talk about Baby Phat to younger generations and they don't know what I'm talking about, I'm like, my mind is blown. I'm like, what do you mean? Like, have you done your research?
Yeah, I'll just add on to Jerome, because, you know, that was like my first job, my first career. I was there for 10 years. And, you know, Black and Asian love, that's Kimora herself. She's Black and Asian, right? So it starts from her. And then as Jerome mentioned, like just the whole like office environment. So yeah, I was also privileged too to just be in this environment that this is how it goes. This is how it is. And kind of hearing Jerome's how he grew up and talking about how I grew up, it's like we kind of actually grew up the same, you know, in the aspect of we've always been surrounded around multiple cultures, right? So it kind of started with us and our upbringings, and they kind of just naturally grew us together. But Kimora was all about United Colors of Benetton, the multiple cultures in one. So if you look back at our campaigns and our runway shows, it was always a necessity, a priority that we had all cultures represented. Obviously, the campaigns were her and her kids. But if you know, in stores like the POP ads, it was always about diversity. When we did like Fabulosity, the JCPenney's line, it was always about diversity, you know. So that's always been, you know, as Jerome mentioned, it's like we were privileged in that capacity, you know, having Russell Simmons, having Kimora Lee Simmons, having this Black and Asian love, and then being in this environment that was like, you know, really supported. So coming outside that bubble was a little bit of a shock for me. I don't know for Jerome, but I was like, what? I'm Asian? No, like, what do you mean? What do you mean doing those Asian signs with the eyes? Like, I haven't seen that since I was like in elementary school. So yeah, we were definitely privileged in that environment for sure.
And I want to add on to that, like, also, you know, being a gay Black male, that and understanding that it was okay to be who I was, right, and not shunned upon or, oh, you're too. There was none of that. It was so, I almost want to cry every time I think about it because it was such a really amazing environment. Yeah. It was created by, of course, the heads created, but like the environment of the everyday people who respected each other enough to just say, this is who you are. This is, you know, and I wasn't the only gay Black male. There was older gay Black males who were there, who was doing things and really loud and I just is the level of confidence that came from seeing all this diversity, all these minorities, whether it is a female boss or, you know, Asian boss, whatever you want to call it, all the norms that was not supposed to happen then was there. Yeah. And I think somewhere in the back of my mind, I am spoiled, like Tina said. When I left, and that's when I went to Paris to do trends and tendance, or what you call it. That's when I realized, like, the world wasn't this utopian. Yeah. and it just was something that made me grow up a little more. But at the same time, I know it was very special because now I know that it can exist in that sense.
And I think what's special too is that because you know how it is to be treated in that way, you can then also create that space because, you know, as you're creating companies, you're both entrepreneurs, you're creating companies. Now you learn how to lead from good leaders who then showed you how to create a company culture that's based on respect and diversity and celebrating everyone. So I think that you also are so important in the fashion industry because you are going to be transmitting these values and multiplying them. Whereas, you know, a lot of people think about fashion, and even myself included, like when I go to fashion shows, sometimes you get a very kind of not the most peaceful or like loving vibe. But I think that what we can offer is like, okay, well, that might not be the vibe, but I'm going to bring that vibe, right? Like, I'm gonna step in and be that light. So I want to ask, go ahead, Tina.
One more thing, me and Jerome and I, we're Black and Asian love. You know,
that's why I picked y'all.
So that's another example I wanted to add. Yes, of, you know, a great experience and.
Yeah. And I love that your example is about mentorship because I think that we should definitely, regardless of what experiences we have, we should be mentoring others and making sure that we're creating that pipeline of talent so that we can multiply ourselves. So I want to ask you one last question about your friendship and that, like, you know, what is the glue that you think holds your friendship together? This is like a Tina and Jerome love fest.
Tina, you want to go first?
I can go first. Honestly, it's just, I don't know. We just have like he said, we're like family at this point. So I would say purpose, energy too. Because I check Jerome sometimes. Like he says, he's a very confident guy and it works in his favor, but you know, so it's all about energy always and being on that page, but purpose and values, you know, we have like similar values in life. And, you know, even though we're so different when it comes to our background, he's from the Bronx, I'm from Federal Way, Washington, but how we kind of grew up was, you know, very disciplined environment. So we, you know, are on the same page without having to be on the same page. So we understand each other very well. Let's start there.
That is definitely very true, and just like the level of respect, like she always kind of saw me as this person that I didn't know I was going to become, kind of thing, you know. So it's very it's a level of respect there. I see her as my sister. She taught me to drive and all this other crazy stuff. Like, it's really cool. So it's just a very different relationship because she's known me since what now is like 20 years, right? Or whatnot. So it's just something that is very rare. She knows that I can get, again, I can be very like, diva, but then she understands where it's coming from, and she actually taught me a lot of how to manage that energy, I guess, in a sense. So this is like this whole like Jedi Knight thing happening here, right? Like, I learned a lot from Tina, and that's the realness, and even like work ethic wise, like we've always been workers, but just those things that are very important that makes our friendship even better. Yeah, this is my sibling in a way,
Yeah. I think he said a key thing. I learned from him too. So we learn from each other, and that still goes. So that keeps us, together because we're both, evolving in our journeys together, separate, whatever that is. And I learned from him too. When it comes to manifestation, and I know we'll talk about that later, Jerome's been my witness to be like, oh, okay. Like, I've seen multiple times throughout his life, manifest so much.
Yep.
Until this day, and I know we'll talk about this later, is like, I do visions. One of the reasons is because of Jerome, and I practice that daily.
Yeah. What I love about this conversation is that the unity that you both have in terms of your friendship is not only creating like game-changing, like, fashion creations, but it's really about also creating this energy of positivity and magic, right? I think that more people should learn how to tap into. And that's why I wanted to invite you both on the show, because I'm like, there's so many like conversations around, wait a second, why are our communities supposed to be fighting? Like, this is not the world that I know of. And it's just that because people are not seeing strong examples of friendships like yours. But we see that when we can just cross away some of those barriers, we are so much more powerful. Yeah, so much more powerful. So we're going to go into this manifestation conversation now, okay? Because the first word, or when I first met you both, I knew that I was like, oh, these are my people, because you talked about the word alignment. And I was like, oh, here we go. Speaking of alignment, this is a nice little alignment of like fashion people that I feel like I could really click with. So how do you define alignment, and how does this concept of alignment play into your work as a creative and as a professional? I don't know who wants to take that on first.
She said, wow. Okay, it is everything to me, as Tina knows. And as I said in the beginning, like it all started with the manifestation, right? And understanding the power of the mind and just the level of spirituality that I think most people are afraid to tap into, right? So for me, alignment comes when there are very few obstacles in your way, and you can see the clear blue sky. I believe in magic so much. It's like part of who I am, and it's like ingrained in like the DNA of the brand, and like how I carry myself and how I speak to people, and like, this one thing. So like the alignment comes when this is what Tina taught me, when you lessen your ego, right? And that Tina taught me was edging God out instead of like, and that element is very, I think about it every day, like, oh, okay, is my ego coming through, or am I like, that stuff is very important to me. And I've learned so much from understanding that ego can really stop you from the alignment, right? So, and Tina knows, like when we were there, when I would get into those, the need, the confusion, the scared, the anger, the you're not noticing me thing, that's when the blessings and the magic kind of stops there. But the moment I stop thinking in that vibration, that's when all the abundance comes back. So So now I'm 35 now. So now I'm like, I've really checked myself as much as I can to remain humbled. I'm a humble person all the time, but my ego comes through as like the big scary monster. It's a hot pink monster who's like want to take up everything, you know? So I try to check in and lessen it and make sure it doesn't come out as much because it doesn't need to exist.
Right.
And that's why I believe and Tina always uses alignment. Like she always uses that term. It's alignment. It's alignment. And so that is ingrained in my mind when I feel things are working out the way it needs to.
Yeah. And what about you, Tina? What does alignment mean to you?
Man, so edging God out, when I left Baby Phat, I was searching for like purpose and identity. And so I got a spiritual life coach. So he taught me that, edging God out. So alignment to me is just that natural flow with God. Because, Baby Phat was such an amazing experience. Yeah. We're talking about the positive aspects of it, but it was also very demanding. I was working 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for 10 years of my life. So when I left, Baby Phat, I was like kind of searching for, wanting, an environment that was aligned to something that, I had values in and that I believed in. That was a great, like a secondary school for me at Baby Phat, right? It was the best opportunity I probably could have ever experienced in my life, but there were some things that I didn't really align to, necessarily. And so when I left and just really went on my spiritual journey, and that's when I, really learned more about like alignment and things naturally flowing. Cause, when you're at a company where you're, flying private, traveling the world and everyone says yes to you, no one says no, you don't really know what alignment is until when I was taken outside that bubble and I was like, oh, okay. Like, the people are perceiving me as me, not with my title. And so that's when I was like, had a very huge wake up call, but then it also taught me like going into that flow, going into that natural alignment. When something doesn't work out and that door doesn't open, it's for a reason. And like Jerome said, you see the blue skies and those doors are opening. God's opening those doors for a reason because that alignment is supposed to be there and it flows. Yeah. And so for me, it's about that flow with God.
Yeah, I love that. And I think what's so important is that we're all working in fashion, and also like in fashion, entertainment, and music, there's a lot of ego. There's a lot of external validation that people are seeking, right? And the only way you're going to be able to succeed and actually for real thrive in that space is if you are strong in your core internally. And the only way you're doing that is if you're tapping into the divine identity within yourself. Yep. And you're able to stand from that space and instead of feeling like you are caught up in the lights and shrinking and being dark, you get to show up and be like, no, I'm the light. It doesn't matter how dark this space is. I'm going to bring that light. But in order to bring that light, you have to be in alignment and to tap into what's inside. So I just so appreciate you doing that, because I think part of this podcast is also about creating and sharing a culture in fashion that I think is more in, from the source that we're all kind of sitting in, and trying to, create that vibration and multiplying that. So I think, we've talked about manifestation. Some people don't know what that means. And, maybe like manifestation 101, right? So a lot of folks are also stuck with very limiting beliefs, We've all, I think, grown up in like environments where maybe people weren't necessarily being on billboards or like traveling the world, right? Like, I think that for me, especially as an immigrant kid, like I was like encouraged to stay in my lane and, do the safe route. So for someone who wants to break out of their limiting beliefs and wants to start that journey to like tapping into magic, what would your advice be to them? And maybe also if you could start off by like defining what manifestation means for people who don't know. Jerome, can you take that?
Do you want me to?
Mine is very deep.
Let's do it.
Just in the New York Times for manifestation, which was a really cool thing to be in, which I manifested. So this is very important to me. For me, manifestation, there's a whole method to it that I think most people now, after all these years of doing it and consistently testing the theory, this is free love, right? There's a muscle that we all have that I think if we use it, we can tap into the divine. So I know for a fact that when I'm manifesting, I am putting myself in a really beautiful, comfortable state, and I'm aligning memories or fragments of different memories to create a new one that is obtainable, that is somewhat realistic, and that feels like I can obtain it. So with that being said, we all have a memory bank. Our brains are amazing machines, and it comes from tapping into that library of senses, right? So I can manifest something right this second, and I know it will come because I can remember the way certain things taste, the sound, the smell, the way the sun feels on my skin. And that's being present. And it's somewhat magical, but it's also real science, right? And the best part is you can do this anywhere you want to, anywhere you are, and anywhere you want to be, or anywhere you want to go. You can do it. You can sit still and take yourself to whatever place, vision that you want to have. But I go technical and I take fragments of the way, let's say, the room smelled in one place that I could remember. Boom. Let's say the taste of salsa water on my tongue. Boom. The sound of the radiator clicking. Boom. The sunlight that hits my skin. The time of day. What I was wearing. How does the fabric feel on my skin? All those things creates a memory that hasn't existed yet. That physically manifests itself because you can stay in it and bring it to fruition. So I think we all can do it. We just need to take the minute and, sometimes this is our worst enemy. Put it down and let your mind do what it needs to do.
Yeah. So I'm hearing two things. Tell me if I got it right, but it's about vision meeting kind of the sensory, right? Like triggering the senses so that you are actually feeling what's in your vision. And actually there is scientific proof to that, because actually like the brain and the heart doesn't actually know the difference between a real memory or an imagination. So it's just, biologically speaking, we're altering our cellular energetic, a life force to then already adapt to that. And that's why alignment is when that new reality and your present reality converge. Right? Ooh, exactly. So good. So good. Tina, do you want to add something to, manifestation and, how advice that you have for people who want to start?
Yeah. Well, Jerome, were we in Miami for a second? Cause like when you took us there with us, like I felt it when you said the sun on my skin, and I was like, oh, I feel like hotness on my face.
Is that really fun?
Yeah. And then you said the fragrance. No. So obviously, like knowing Jerome for so long, like that's been him always, right? I grew up like you said, an immigrant family. Like it was all about survival. I didn't know anything about the word manifestation until like later in life. And then literally seeing Jerome say, I'm gonna manifest this. And and then boom, it happens. So, for me, when it comes to like limiting, you talked about like limiting beliefs and learning how to manifest, so I learned this as more of an adult in my life. And I'm a very logical person. I'm, type A a little bit. I have that creative side, but not, to the extent of Jerome where, he literally can envision these things and that's his gift that he has, right? That it's a natural gift for him. And it is something that we should practice and we can practice in our life. But for me, it was like, part of it is like really knowing yourself. You got to know yourself first. And Jerome knows himself, right? He told us like when he was very young, he knew exactly what he wanted. I grew up different. I grew up very sheltered. Like my mom and my brother, like they made major decisions in my life. You know, even though I had this role at Baby Phat as a VP, like, you know, I knew what I needed to do. But when it came to my personal life, when I left Baby Phat, I was so clueless. I was so lost, and I had to really find myself. Once I found myself, then I was learning about manifestation and applying it. You know, I heard about it, I would see it, but then it was like, you know, applying that to my life and then applying the visions, you know, and practicing that. Like Jerome said, it is a muscle. It's something you can practice and people can, you know, invite into their life if they really focus on that and they stay present. But, you know, it really does start with knowing yourself first. Because if you don't know yourself, you don't know what you want. How are you supposed to manifest things that you want, you know? So that's my add-on to Jerome.
Yeah. Now, just to follow up, Tina, like in terms of like knowing yourself, like when you were in that process, what kind of questions were you asking to get to that self, like knowledge of self?
Man, I was in my early 30s, you know, like I said, on top of the world, you know, I ended up getting a spiritual life coach. I was searching for purpose and I was searching for identity. And at the start of my journey, like after year 1, my brother had passed away and he was my mentor and he was 7 years older. So he always made, without me realizing it, he always made business decisions, not even business decisions, like all the major decisions in my life. He always had that influence. He always was that soundboard. But until he was gone, that's when I realized, I don't know what I want. I don't know who I am.
Yeah.
Do I leave the fashion industry, you know, because it's so not fulfilling for me. You know, in 2010, you know, it was the core of fashion and it was the core of the height of fast fashion. There was no fulfillment of purpose at that point. So especially when my brother passed away at 39 in his sleep, natural, like out of nowhere, that was a wake up call for me to like, you know, figure out like, yes, purpose. Who was I? What's my next step in my career? Why am I here? What am I doing? And, you know, I look at it like then I understood all the things that Jerome did and practiced. And, you know, then I started applying that into my life. You know, I had my coach and, you know, and just really indulged myself. But I had that kind of tangible example because I was around that, you know, like, you know, Jerome's so young, you know, I just looked at him as like a happy-go-lucky kid, you know, super talented, but, you know, I would hear, you know, I'd be so in my zone, in my lane. I never really like appreciated life at that time, but I would, you know, I'd be like, you know, I'd see him go in and out and, you know, change his looks and, you know, so I would like peep it, but I was like, so like head down, like you said, like the immigrant style of a family, just head down, do my work and never really developed myself at that time.
Yeah, thank you. I love just hearing like how both of you give to each other in very different ways, but in very full ways. You know, you're like replenishing each other. And I think that that's a beautiful example of the kind of relationships we should all strive to have, right? It's like quality versus quantity. So we're going to shift gears a little bit, but it's still related because Jerome, I know you're launching your own fashion brand and you've got a special meaning behind it. Tell us about the name, where it comes from. What does it mean?
So 531, it's my birthday.
Hey,
May 31st. But that was the number that my grandmother told me to always look for when she's sending a symbol or sign or something, you know, good vibrations before she passed away. So, you know, she said that, oh yeah, grandma, cool, love you. And then she passed away. I was like 15. This is actually right before I got Baby Phat. So I didn't think about that. Now, every time I do something right or give something or feed someone, or it's something very interesting, the number just pops up, whether it's on the time or a license plate, and I just happen to look and see it. So the number is a very spiritual number for me, and it also equals to the number 9, and it's been guiding me all this time. So yeah, very spiritual driven fashion brand.
Awesome. Yeah. Now, I mean, we all know fashion is a very beautiful, glitzy, glamorous industry, but there's also a lot of toxicity in it as well. I think we can all agree with that. How intentional are you about creating a different kind of space within fashion, and how do you envision that space in its relationship to sustainability and social justice? Yeah. I'll let whoever who wants to take this on.
You want to go? Or you want me to go?
You go. I just spoke. I mean, I can do it, but you should go.
Okay.
Brother and sister over here. Like,
yeah. So as I was mentioning, like leaving Baby Phat, I wasn't as fulfilled, because I had probably, reached the height of my position at the company at the time. And so I was definitely feeling empty, as I was mentioning, and I felt like I had no purpose. And, the premise of the brand was amazing for the experience, but I will say, we were pushing a materialistic lifestyle. And so I, on that journey of finding myself, I created this concept, Change and Crew. And so not like Jerome's direction, I'm trying to point to the screen.
Yes.
Because Jerome is, he obviously didn't mention it, but I always like talking about him. He's very conceptual. He has a natural gift of forecasting. And, he's innovative, And so for me, I created this brand in my mind back when I left Baby Phat of something purposeful and that gives back. And so I'm actually going to launch, and I kind of did like a pre-launch, but my brand is fashion-based, sustainable and ethical sourcing. And it's really focusing on compassion campaigns. So it's a split. It's really, having that influence, and obviously branding and marketing is my background, and having that influence of obviously quality products, not necessarily, I would say, a collection, but just more for like mankind's best friend. Having that influence of having quality products, sustainable products, and, being aware of, being ethical. But really the other part is compassion campaigns. So partnering with organization and really promoting and featuring that organization. So it's really like a message purpose-based brand, still in the space of fashion. But, my creativity is more on just like the branding and the marketing message of it.
Yeah, I love it. Thank you. Jerome.
Well, as you can see, I'm a very happy person, and sometimes it's not everyone's cup of tea, especially in this industry. So they either think you're fake or you want something from them, but I'm neither of the such. I'm always in my own little world and manifest my own abundance, right? So I'm just naturally a happy person, i.e. the way I was raised. So my purpose is to really just show the next generation or whomever needs to see it that there's another path. You don't have to be a jerk. You don't have to be mean. There was a Tina was there when actually, Ruby, you're connected to this too. Right after we met you, we went to a fashion show that day, and that day, with my cameraman, you remember that?
Yeah.
That day, I encountered someone who was from the old guard of fashion, the mean, the evil, the yelling and screaming for no apparent reason.
Yeah.
Backstage. And
directly at him.
Oh, wow.
At me. Mind you, I was doing all this for Lyft, a little mini thing for Lyft as a, and Lyft wasn't that big then, but it was significant, right? You knew Lyft. And so we went backstage, and this one woman was very, very rude and very disgusting to myself, mainly me, but to the whole crew, which is myself and Christina. And she reminded me about my power. At first, I got very little and very confused and very, because I wasn't, but then I realized that I'm part of the next wave, baby. I have a high vibration. I know exactly what I want and how I'm going to get it. And I have crazy talent. So that is when, not the ego, but the confidence came forward to say, oh, I know what I need to do. Shift the vibration. So I ended up shifting the whole thing.
Yeah.
Not even having to badmouth this person or talk dirty about this person.
Yeah.
Naturally, the people who didn't want to work with this person anymore ended all the contracts with this person. And I'm not trying to feel, I'm not happy about it or anything like that. But I understood what my role was and is and will be in this industry. And that is to always bring a high vibration, always be polite and respectful, always treat people with respect, always do the work. And there's no need to be rude or disgusting or mean, because those old guards are now trying to figure themselves out right now. And I'm sitting here in a bright loft, happy, thanking God every single day that I stay true to myself, and that I continue to try to help as many people as possible without asking for anything in return. Right. And that is the way that I want the industry to go into. And it seems to be shifting and such, thanks to all the things that's happening. So I'm grateful.
Yeah. And I think at the end of the day, again, like what Tina said about knowing yourself, having that relationship with a higher power, you come from a space of abundance. And I think a lot of times people who are insecure, it's just because they have a scarcity mindset. They don't believe that everybody can win. But when you're coming from a space of abundance, we all win. And we all win. It's a win-win situation. So I totally get where you're coming from.
You know, there's so much of it that we all can sip from the same river, you know, and I always say that, I'm like, there's no competition. And I remember when I was a little younger, and I would just think about just the attitudes that will come towards me when I would be so happy to see someone, or, you know, I genuinely, I'm just a happy person. And I keep feeling like, wow, I'm a little too happy for people, but I'm a happy person. And, you know,
I get it.
My parents, my mom and my dad both had to remind me that I've always been this way, that I've always been high vibrational, that I've always been happy, that I've always, you know. And it's funny because I during my time at Baby Phat, I was avoiding my dad. So like, I'm gay, so you don't understand me, Dad. You don't understand me, Dad. My dad's a Black military man who has a PhD. He's a doctor. He's a doctorate in all this other stuff. He's a brilliant guy. But I was avoiding my dad. I'm not gonna talk to my dad. He doesn't get me. And that's once I unlocked that energy, it was amazing because he's still there. We're super close, too close. Like he's like telling you all kinds of stuff I don't want to hear now, right? He's retired. But it's one of those things. It's like knowing yourself, like you said, like you both said, and knowing and having when you have that validation from your parents in a way, it does a whole nother thing to you, right? Because I think now that I am no longer, and there was times that I was feeling I have to prove myself. But now, after having the validation from the people who know me really well, I'm just like, take it or leave it. And I'm happy, and I want to help you genuinely, and I don't need anything from you. I just want to figure out how you can get to your goal too, you know?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I love that. Now, speaking of old guards and new guards and things changing, right? What advice do you have for folks, the next generation of fashion professionals who are navigating the industry, because things are shifting and things are changing, as you said. So Tina, you're the veteran here. Like, what would you recommend? And I know you're also a fashion professor as well. So you know, what advice do you have for the next generation?
Yeah. So I'm teaching at FIT. So I'm always with these young students, and, you know, it's amazing to like see their mindset. So, you know, I always tell them, you know, again, be authentic to who you are, you know, really understanding who you are, being present, you know, with taking us back to like Jerome and, you know, helping us understand manifestation and, you know, hearing all the senses and stuff like that. And it's something that I always remind myself, because again, when I was at Baby Phat, I was not present. I was on, you know, the next day and the next week. And so, you know, that is something that I try to practice daily, is just being present, like being present in this conversation, you know, and just listening to this conversation, you know, appreciating like what we're talking about right now. So being authentic and being present. I also tell my students too, and just any younger self, is like, you know, expand your network, expand your friendship. You know, I guess, you know, our conversation alone, it's like coming from different backgrounds and different upbringings. It, you know, it really expands, you know, our mindset, and it allows us to have more like what you're, you know, really promoting, is having these positive relationships. I mean, you can't have that if you don't expand outside of where you're from, right? If we just stay within what we know, or the same type of music we listen to, or the, you know, in the same country that we're from, we can't really. And so that helps, you know, a part of your journey, and it helps with the curation of brands when you're working, you know, that just adds on to that knowledge, right? But I will say, like, the students, are on another level. They get it.
Yeah.
Like they get purpose, they get like sustainability, just with the earth, but just with people. You know, they get the equality. Like, so the next, you know, that generation that's coming up right now, that's in school, like I give props to them because they're also, their maturity level is like on another level because they have technology, plus and minus, right? They have the technology, so they have the accessibility, but they're definitely better than, you know, when I was in school 20 years ago. So I'm really excited to see like what's going to happen because there is, like Jerome said, there is a shift happening. That lady that he mentioned is a very well-known publicist, and that's the older times now for sure.
Okay. Well, then Jerome, like I'd love to hear what you've got to say about this.
For the next generation, just be, just be patient with yourself. Mm-hmm. I think that's something, while I am a happy-go-lucky person, I am pretty tough on myself. And sometimes that comes off of me being a kind of a jerk to other people too, you know? So I learned along the way to just be patient because it's going to come if you do the work, keep your head down. Yeah. Stay respectful, humble, and creative is very important. And then you guys talked about expanding, and my whole slogan for this chapter in my career is expanding a network is about, I say to myself, expensiveness is expensiveness. Meaning, the expansiveness is the expansiveness. So all of that thing of understanding your place in the universe and your place in the world and what your role is and what you can bring to any situation brings abundance, right? And most people, they don't know that. They don't tap into that. They just want to go straight to the material side of things. And that stuff is very temporary. And I'm just very grateful. And I think we all remain grateful. And like Christina said, being present and being respectful, the abundance just comes right to you.
Yeah. You attract it. You don't even have to chase it. It just
like water.
Yeah. Like alignment, right? Like you're aligning yourself with the right like space and energy. It comes to you. Yeah. So thank you both so much. I just have one last question before we wrap up. And that's just, telling us what's next for you and where folks can find you if they want to know more about your work. Tina.
So I see on the bottom, Instagram and website. So everything sits on my website as well to find me. So yeah, I'm continuing to teach at FIT. I created a personal branding and marketing certificate course for the school. I also, like I mentioned before, starting off changing crew and really going full force with that. So that is something to look out for, just really to be, a position of, influence in a positive way. So those two things, and I'm continuing to consult as well, focusing on brand strategy and partnership. So that's what's on my plate. It's definitely enough and a lot. And still, I would say just focusing on myself, we always can be better. And so that is always on a daily for me because I'm always like thinking about the other person or the next thing. So, putting myself forward.
Love it. All right, Jerome, take us home.
Oh, man. As you mentioned, the 531 brand is being relaunched. It's going to be very, very different than what people think it is. So that's going to be the focus. I'm also doing more art, which is so crazy. I just started doing like anime as a hobby, and now people are like interested in it. So I think my world is moving more towards the art side of everything. Also along with like, let's say toys and all those really cool, fun things that feeds into my nerdy personality. And, still doing my trends and color and focusing on just being Jerome. It's really fun right now to be me. And I feel very blessed and very happy. And I have a great support system. And now I want to take us all there, right? So that's where I'm headed. You can find me on Instagram, my name, Jerome Lamaar, and on the website has all the goodies, so you can see where I'm at.
Well, thank you both so much for this wonderful and just soul affirming conversation. I hope that the folks out there are feeling this crazy energy that I am feeling myself. So for all of those who tuned in to today's episode of Grit and Glamour, if you felt the magic today, pass it on to somebody else, and hope, and we all wish for you love, joy, and magic. Thank you all so much for joining us, and I hope to see you on the next episode of Grit and Glamour. Bye.